Gits, man, they were a force to be reckoned with.
Very high energy, hard punk rock.
Major labels were running around everywhere. Everybody wanted the next Nirvana.
What struck me about Mia singing was just the power of it.
Everybody was under suspicion. You were looking right and looking left and thinking, like, is this the person that did it?
A woman who was passing by had seen a body laying in the street. She just happened to be a block away from the Seattle Fire Department firehouse, and she walked over and told them about the body.
Requesting police. They believe they may have a homicide there. No body took off at
Our little bubble got burst. Our little safe home got broken into and vandalized.
It was the last time that, in a way, that we all still had our innocence. It was the end of an era.
The Seattle music scene at the beginning of the 90s, it was our own small little scene, loud, fast, and out of control.
Energetic, sincere.
Spontaneous in a lot of ways.
We were all doing our thing, and all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, Nirvana's huge. What happened?
Right.
Whoa.
Suddenly, Seattle became the center of the music universe.
First time I saw the Gits, it was amazing. And just blown away. Like, who's this band? It's pretty damn amazing.
No, man, they were just on fire. They were definitely on fire.
We would end up playing the same gigs as many bands that would later become huge. Nirvana was one, Reverend Horton Heat, Mudhoney, and there was an opening act, and we're like, oh man, this is like pretty awful, but Mia liked it, and it turned out his name was Beck. Mia was extremely intelligent and intuitive and funny, really, really funny.
She had definitely a bluesy feel to her singing style.
Not unlike the way that Janis Joplin was a blues singer, you know, fronting a rock band. Mia was very much a blues singer, kind of fronting a punk band.
Yeah, Atlantic Records came along. Tim Summers was really interested in the band. I mean, it was just sort of going on. And the Gits were very excited. And, you know, I just dropped to my knees, you know, just like somebody punched you and the wind got knocked out of you.
3, Charlie, 3, and 3, Charlie, 5 to it.
The victim had been laying on her back with her right leg over her left leg. And the hood pulled down over her face. There were ligature-type marks with the string drawn tightly around her neck.
Oh, shit went white. I just didn't even hear anything. I couldn't even, I don't know. I flatlined in a way. I was just stunned and devastated.
It was disbelief mostly, and horror at what she must have experienced and during the final minutes of her life, and how scared she must have been was what went through my mind.
Did she get in a cab? Did she get in a car with somebody that we all knew? Did she walk for a while and get picked up somewhere along the way? I mean, a million scenarios went through our heads about what might have happened.
The thing that really struck me really hard at the time was how it could have been any one of us, and how many times, you know, I've come home late at night in that exact same situation. She could have been me, and I could have been her.
We took photographs of the scene, checked the scene. It's kind of an isolated area. It sits back behind the Catholic Community Services Church in a vacant lot, and then the Bethel Church sits on the other corner.
The fact that she may have been posed, and there may have been these other sort of psychopathic motives, religious-based motives, only added to the number of suspects who were in the area.
It seemed like everyone you looked at could have killed Mia. You sit in the bar with a couple drinks in you, and you start looking around. I mean, how do we know we haven't had a drink with the guy that did this?
It was so scary to be told that this person was still on the loose. Not just like some random guy who might be out there, but like, this is a person who we think is in your community, who is stalking you, who is actually dialed in and has your number, kind of a thing. And that's frightening. That was terrifying.
That added to the speculation that maybe we're looking at, you know, a serial killer type of crime. And so whatever personal psychological motive they had, they wanted to put some sort of religious stamp on the crime scene.
I noticed scuff marks on the toes of her shoes, as a scuff mark on the left side of her hip, on her flesh, as well as on the belt just below that flesh mark. There were other little items, metal pieces that were strewn about the body. Immediately to the east of the victim, approximately 1 foot away from her head, there was a tire residue mark from a vehicle. That ran approximately 13 inches in length. We didn't see any signs there of any struggle or any fight. Well, we figured she'd been killed somewhere else. It appeared that she was dumped there, and the person sped off, squealing the tires and leaving the scene.
You have the fact that with her own sort of creative identity, her band, that became the deadly weapon in the case. That's pretty tough to take. Second, Mia was a great singer, and the fact that her vocal cords became the exact area of her demise is additionally tough to take. Her underwear and brassiere had been stuffed into her pockets. And as would become readily apparent and horrifically apparent, Mia also had been brutally sexually assaulted.
It was noticed that the black brassiere appeared to have been ripped and also cut. It was minus one of the cups for the breast. At this point, both my partner and I thought that our killer took a souvenir with him. And this is one of the things that we never put out. We never put out in the press. So in case something came up later on, either through a search warrant or whatever, and they found this, then we could tie it in.
And they were also telling us not to talk about the fact
and they were
that she
telling
was
us
raped.
not to talk about it, and not to talk about the fact that she was raped. And we were like, forget about it. That's not going to happen.
So we felt a combination of, you know, rage and feeling
Fear.
horrified, as well as feeling fearful, because this guy was still out there, and we weren't even supposed to be talking about it.
They were reddish, fresh markings. They immediately suspected a bite mark. There clearly was tooth scraping, but insufficient indentation to yield a unique tooth print or teeth print. That was frustrating. Knowing that there was no semen, but knowing that there was sexual assault and knowing that there was pain, and adding to that mix the tooth scrapings, leads one to the conclusion that the motive, the precise motive for this murder, was pain. What he wanted to bring about was not his own gratification. He wanted to bring about pain. That's what he got out of it, was Mia's pain.
There were swabs that were taken from her breast area. These swabs were preserved.
And when we found out there's no semen, there's no bite mark that can be attached to or connected to one particular person, pessimism overtook the investigation a bit.
Oh, the frustration for this is going nowhere. It's just enormous. It's frustrating. It hurts because you can't give the family any concrete information. You can't ease their pain.
It was brutal to know that Mia's killer was still loose. I became kind of paranoid because I didn't know if this guy was like, I don't know, like a Git murderer or something.
Who did this? Dementia. A mild social dementia, I think, is the best way to describe that feeling when the initial investigation was going on.
I knew how Mia could scream. I'd heard her do it on stage. Someone had to have heard what happened or seen what happened.
That witness, that magical witness that we kept looking for or hoping for, just was not there.
George Sector, fires at the scene, 24 Avenue South.
There was just nothing that would step right out and hit us between the eyes and say, hey, this is where we need to go.
When the police started their investigation, I fully expected that they would have it solved in 48 hours. How could anyone do something that horrendous to someone else and not leave any evidence?
She could have been killed in a vehicle. We didn't know. She could have been killed at some other apartment or a location. We just did not know. We needed to establish a timeline on her. Earlier in the evening, we knew she was at the Comet Tavern.
who was with her at the Comet when she left, why did she leave, where did she go, who was she going to hook up with, how does she get from the Comet Tavern to where her body was recovered, did she take a cab, did she accept a ride, did she walk? So these are all the sort of loose ends that need to be tied up. Just come back from a triumphant concert tour, had the world in our hand that last day.
We were scheduled to tour together, and so the night at the Comet was celebratory.
It was an upbeat time for Mia and the Gits. It was a happy time, and as is so often the case with the tragedy, it was a beautiful day. It was a gorgeous day. July 7 in Seattle, Washington. Capitol Hill, Mia was on foot, as she liked to do.
The night that Mia was killed, myself and my best friend, Celine, were with her at the Comet. It was like a million other times that we had hung out at the Comet.
And she ran into many friends that they hadn't seen in a while. We know that shortly before closing at 2 a.m., she was there and left.
She tried getting Mia to stay overnight with her. Mia said, no, I'm just going to grab a cab and go on home. And so that was the last time that she was seen.
Here, there's a 83-minute gap, which is maddening.
Somewhere between 2 o'clock and 3:19, when the witness saw her laying on the street, she was killed.
With the 80-minute gap, only 2 people know what happened. One is permanently silenced, one chose to remain silent. With that, all we can do is glean and deduce.
Everybody was under suspicion. And so there was this general, just sort of dark cloud over everybody, because everywhere you went, you were looking right and looking left and thinking, like, is this the person that did it?
You know, the next friend of yours was taken to the police station to get questioned about things, right? Yeah, I had to quit thinking about it.
They were taking semen samples off of our friends. They were telling us that it was likely somebody that we knew.
One of the things that we thought of was the possibility that they had a fight, things got out of hand, and something happened.
But what was perfectly clear about Robert was his cooperation, his willingness to give up any sample, to do anything for the investigation, to take the polygraph, and all the rest. In looking at the number of possible suspects, here beyond the traditional type of inquiries, it was expanded because of Mia's celebrity into those who were jealous of her, who were rivals of her, who for whatever reason wanted to be sort of part of the scene, so to speak. So that's when you had these crazy calls that Courtney Love was involved, that Joan Jett was involved, the 7 Year Bitch, a local band, who were her friends, not her enemies, but that they were involved. After just a couple of weeks, we decided the police weren't doing enough. I didn't feel like they really cared that much because she was only, a punk rock singer with shabby clothes when she was found. So we started interviewing private investigators. A private investigator was hired by the Gits. Everything they could do, they did. And we did. You know, you need to keep working hard. We have promises to keep to the family and to her bandmates and to her.
We had this idea that if she had had some sort of self-defense training or had some ability, maybe she could have gotten away.
Home alive, get home alive from wherever you are.
We just had this sense of we have to do something. We can't just sit around and feel fearful. If one person feels like they want to carry a gun, well, okay, let's give gun classes.
Pearl Jam and Nirvana and, you know, all these different people, whether they were close or not, were so moved by what had happened that they wanted to support not only this organization, but support trying to find who had killed Mia.
We wanted to write a song that was about Mia's situation, but sort of touched on the whole violence against women. She senses somebody following her on the street. And I think that's another aspect of this whole thing, is just being aware of your surroundings. And she's actually physically confronted by this guy and is forced to, you know, fight him off, which she does, and she wins.
I realized that the only way that the police were going to stay on the case was if we kept it in the news.
We got Warner Brothers to put up money to do a concert in Seattle, and actually a lot of bands pitched in.
And Nirvana came and played one. It was one of their last shows ever.
And it wound up getting a lot of publicity, which was a good thing at the time, a good thing to keep the pressure on the police.
My biggest challenge at the beginning was just to get to know the community, get to know the players, because it was diffuse. In death, everybody became her best friend. So it was a challenge to try to piece everybody together. They led kind of nomadic lifestyles. A lot of them didn't have phones. A lot of them didn't have cars. I spent a lot of nights crawling around the clubs, talking to people in alleyways, talked to a lot of people on a dance floor, shrieking at the top of my lungs to get information. Talking with Mia's roommates, I learned that she had just met a new friend. A couple of days after her death, he was yelling, you know, "The bitch is dead, the bitch is dead. Well, why did I do it? Why did I do it?" Pretty damning evidence. I did my usual background search on him. I talked to him. I searched his car. I took samples. I talked to the police about him. The police eventually gave him a polygraph, which he passed. One of the biggest pools of suspects I originally looked at were the group of fans who just followed her from concert to concert. She had started an internet romance with the guy, and he started interspersing comments about Mia, about how he would do her as he did Mia Zapata. And what I discovered was not heartening. He would often go to a local school, watch the young girls playing soccer on a field while he sat in his car. And then he would typically frequent a porn store in the area. I was concerned. He seemed to me like a classic stalker, frankly. And I collected as much information as I could, and then I turned it over to the police. At times it was frustrating because I would work so hard on developing information on someone, and I would literally turn over a booklet of information of the Seattle police. They dated before. He was somewhat obsessed with her. He'd gone to concerts of hers. He fit the typical profile. But What was the most damning evidence was that he was driving a cab in the Central District that night. And yet when I confronted him about it, he lied and said that he was staying with a friend at Olympia that night. I was excited. It seemed to me really the first decent lead that I received, something that I could really hang my hat on. I was pretty hot on the case. I mean, I thought there was a very good chance that we'd finally solve the murder. Then I confronted the man and told him that I knew that he was driving a cab that night. He didn't break down and confess, but he cried and confessed to having a severe drug problem and assured me that he would do nothing to hurt Mia.
He was looked at. The fact remains there was insufficient physical evidence to arrest him, much less charge the man.
I think that everybody felt very discouraged after the investigation of the cab driver went nowhere.
Lee wanted to keep working on the case, but we were out of money.
There were such high hopes that we would be able to solve this case. You know, I had high hopes. I wanted it more than anything else in the world.
We decided to bring the files down to the Seattle police and try to make contact with them after all these years. A lot of people had given up. Someone told me, let it go, Steve, just let it go. Never gonna find out who did it, and if you did, it wouldn't make any difference. But it would make a difference, because that person wouldn't be able to do it again if they were in jail. The Seattle cold case detectives decided to pursue Mia's case because of all the publicity and because they knew it meant so much to the community.
And I focused specifically on several swabs that were taken at autopsy at the site of what I believe to be bite marks. The possibility of developing a suspect profile from samples taken at autopsy was slim. However, given the advances in the technology of DNA analysis, I felt it was just one more thing that we must do, and it was those samples that I asked the crime lab to look at.
I was hopeful that I might be able to generate a DNA profile. What I was not so hopeful or didn't quite know is whether I'd find somebody foreign to that of Mia Zapata, because these samples were collected from her own body. Once the DNA typing profiles were generated, I was able to subtract out Mia Zapata's DNA profile. And when I did do that, I was able to then pull out a single source male profile.
When I first learned there was a DNA profile of a male suspect, I believe indeed that could be Mia Zapata's killer. There was no match in that felon databank. The next step is to submit that profile to the National DNA Index System to determine whether there's any DNA profile matching across the nation. So I was extremely disappointed. I believe that very well probably was the suspect's DNA left there on Mia Zapata's body, but it matched no one.
All you can do is wait. You then spin out your own sort of scenarios that the person who did this is now dead. The person who did this left the country. The person who did this sort of bizarrely got it out of their system and haven't committed any other crimes, right?
And so once a week, it is again searched to determine whether a new sample has been introduced.
There was a hit from this unknown male profile to a convicted felon in the state of Florida. It was a great feeling. It was, the best feeling that you can have when you work this type of job.
I got a phone call from Jody Sass saying, we have a match, that we've received a call from the state of Florida.
And so I'll never forget when Craig Mike Soul called me and said, basically, are you sitting down? They got a hit.
It was the lead I was looking for. It was the only hope of a lead, and it had identified someone. But my next thought was, how can I verify, at least in my own mind, that this man's a potential suspect? And I learned a number of things about Jesus Mejia. First, that he was here in Seattle at the time of Mia's murder. Secondly, that he had a vehicle and was mobile at the time. I also learned that he lived in the area where Mia Zapata's body was found, that he had been a suspect in an exposing incident just north of the Comet Tavern where she was last seen, and that the address where he lived was in a path from the Comet Tavern to his residence. He had been arrested for assault, for battery on a spouse, for robbery. It supported the possibility that he was a man who was very violent towards women.
So you sort of take all these facts in, and it just adds to the unjustness of it, but it certainly motivated us. Conviction that Mr. Mejia had. He's out of Florida. Okay. Bye-bye.
We had many challenges facing us as we were flying across the country on our way to Florida. Certainly, at the top of that list was the possibility that we couldn't locate Jesus Mejia.
The U.S. Marshals, who have national jurisdiction, agreed to make initial contact and confirm that Jesus Mejia was still living in the area.
After a day of surveillance, we couldn't find the vehicle that he typically drove. That caused us some concern. Suddenly we're thinking to ourselves, is he really here? We believed he was here, his wife was there, but no Jesus Mejia. The Monroe County Sheriff deputy went into the wife's business, talked to the wife, and he learned that the day we arrived in the state of Florida, Jesus Mejia left Marathon and traveled to Miami, but where in Miami we didn't know. They went to that address, and lo and behold, whose van is parked outside that address but Jesus Mejia. We got a call just an hour and a half after the van had been located saying Jesus Mejia was in custody.
The day finally came. The day that nobody ever thought would come finally came.
I was elated, and I was sad and angry all over again.
It was old wound opening. It was like, oh my God, this hurts so much.
Sir, is your true and correct name Jesus Mesquia?
Yes.
Courtroom was packed most every day. Members of the Gits, led by Steve Moriarty, were in court every day. The trial was extremely difficult for all of us who sat through it, Mia's family especially, because they had to relive this all over again. They had to see photographs of Mia's body.
It was like 11 years of rage. When I first saw him, I couldn't believe it. I mean, damn, he's big.
Huge. And the thought crossed my mind that all of the effort and thought and wishing that we had put into, if Mia had known some sort of self-defense tactic, maybe she could have kicked this guy's ass, flew out the window. And I realized, no way. Man is a giant.
The biggest challenge at trial was articulating to the jurors why a single piece of evidence, saliva, is proof beyond the reasonable doubt of murder in the first degree. The medical examiner, Dr. Ray, provided very compelling testimony that these injuries, the bite marks, the rape injuries, the sexual assault, and the ligature strangulation markings were all contemporaneous. The saliva, therefore, was not left on Mia's body at another previous time unassociated with the time of murder. It was left at the same time that the sexual assault and strangulation markings were done. Therefore, we could prove beyond any doubt that Mr. Mesquia's mouth and his teeth were on Mia's chest at the time that she was being strangled and raped. And that means he's guilty of murder in the first degree.
Science has evolved to such an extent now that we know that you can speak to someone and deposit your DNA on them.
The defense suggested that it may have migrated through her clothing, through a sweatshirt, a t-shirt, and her bra. I didn't believe that was a remote possibility. There was no reasonable explanation.
We want to show that Mr. Mesquia was in the area, that he worked in the area, that he received a speeding ticket in the area. These are facts, but they're designed to show the jurors that these are corroborative of the DNA evidence. Her vocal cords, her own musical instrument, would be squeezed and constricted. When we don't hear anything for a second day, you start to get a little antsy, that's for darn sure. But then that third day, you don't hear anything, then you start questioning yourself, so it gets tough because you start to fear that there's a hung jury, correct? I think he believed that he was untouchable. He was arrogant, and he really was ice. He was just cold. He seemed like a man without a conscience. We finally hear, 11 years after the fact, Jesus Mesquia is guilty of murder in the first degree. When the guilty verdict came in, it was a huge relief. It was wonderful. Even the court bailiff cried. Emotions were pretty high.
Were you surprised by the verdict?
Convicted murderer Jesus Mesquia says nothing as he leaves the King County Courthouse. His long stint as a killer on the loose ends.
The verdict is always, to me, more important than the sentence.
Mr. Mesquia, is there anything you wish to say in your behalf?
child could manage to touch the lives of so many strangers. Mia's gone, and she's never coming back.
Have you no dignity, no manhood, no conscience?
Now it's over, and now hopefully we can put it behind us.
I'm just glad that he'll be rotting in prison.
Relief.
I've worked
Absolutely.
25, 30 cold case investigations to the point of charging.
Did you kill Mia?
The Mia Zapata murder investigation was certainly one of the most rewarding.
It was very a monumental day, but strangely quiet.
The future for them, for the Gits and Mia, the sky was the limit, really. They were very talented, had great songs.
She meant every single thing that she said, and every song that she sang, every time she sang it, she sang with the same sort of emotion and passion.
All of us get older, you know. We see the wrinkles on our faces and things and that, and, you know, Mia is always going to be 27. There's great sadness because, you know, I've got children now. Other friends of ours have families and got married and do all those things that people do. And she'll never get to have done any of those sorts of things.